There is a peculiar loneliness that accompanies certain minds, not because they dislike people, not because they believe themselves superior, but because they experience the world in ways that others rarely understand. If you have often felt more comfortable alone than surrounded by noise, if your greatest ideas have appeared in silence rather than in crowds, if people have mistaken your quiet nature for weakness, then perhaps what you have been calling isolation has never been isolation at all. Perhaps it has been the human psyche. I repeatedly encountered individuals who believed something was wrong with them. They questioned why they preferred solitude, why superficial conversations exhausted them, why they seemed to think differently from everyone around them. Society quickly gave them labels: too quiet, too serious, too distant, too complicated. Yet the more I observed these individuals, the more I discovered something extraordinary. Many of them were not socially incapable. They were psychologically independent. There is an enormous difference. The world often assumes intelligence, reveals itself through quick answers, fast conversations, sharp arguments, public confidence, public questioning, connecting ideas that others never notice. Imagine standing beside a crowded river. The surface moves rapidly. The current appears powerful. Now imagine a quiet lake hidden deep within a forest. Nothing seems to happen. The surface barely moves. Yet beneath that stillness, life quietly flourishes. The human mind behaves in exactly the same way. Some minds process externally, others process internally. The quiet thinker frequently pauses before answering, not because they lack intelligence, because dozens of possibilities are already unfolding inside their mind. While others search for immediate responses, they search for accurate ones. This difference often creates misunderstanding. Teachers may mistake reflection for hesitation. Employers may confuse silence with uncertainty. Friends may interpret observation as disinterest. Yet the unconscious knows another truth. The deepest rivers rarely make the loudest sound. One of the greatest mistakes humanity continues making is confusing visibility with value. We assume the loudest voice possesses the strongest ideas. Yet confidence does not always speak first. Wisdom rarely rushes. True understanding almost never competes for attention. Many of the brightest individuals I encountered carried an unusual habit. They spent enormous amounts of time alone, not because they feared people, because they needed uninterrupted space to understand themselves. Most people become uncomfortable the moment silence appears. They reach for distraction, conversation, entertainment, noise, anything to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. The reflective mind does something entirely different. It walks towards silence. It is within solitude that intuition begins speaking. It is within reflection that the unconscious quietly organizes experiences into wisdom. This is why highly reflective individuals often seem older than their years, not because they have lived longer, because they have processed life more deeply. A single disappointment becomes months of reflection. One meaningful conversation becomes years of insight. One mistake becomes permanent wisdom. Where others quickly move on, they quietly transform. This process is invisible, which is why it is so often underestimated. The person sitting quietly in the corner may appear disengaged. Throughout my work, I noticed another fascinating pattern. Highly intelligent individuals often question themselves more than anyone else. This surprised many people. Society expects intelligence to create certainty. It often creates curiosity instead. The more deeply someone understands the complexity of the human psyche, the less eager they become to declare absolute certainty. They begin saying, "Perhaps, I'm not sure yet. There may be another explanation." The ego dislikes these words. The ego seeks quick conclusions. The self seeks understanding. There is profound wisdom hidden inside uncertainty. This is why humility and intelligence frequently appear together, not because intelligent people lack confidence, because they understand how much still remains unknown. Imagine standing beneath the night sky. The more stars you notice, the more aware you become of the vastness surrounding you. Knowledge produces the same effect. Every answer reveals another mystery. Every discovery uncovers another question. This realization makes thoughtful people appear quieter over time, not because they have less to say, because they become more careful about what deserves saying. Many people fear being alone because loneliness feels empty. Many people fear being alone because loneliness feels empty. The reflective individual eventually discovers something remarkable. Solitude is not emptiness. Eventually, it is possibility. Within solitude, ideas mature, dreams become clearer, old wounds reveal their lessons. The unconscious finally has room to speak. This is why your greatest insights rarely arrive during constant activity. They arrive while walking alone, driving quietly, watching the rain, sitting without distraction. The world calls these moments unproductive. The psyche calls them essential. Perhaps this explains why you have always needed more time alone than other people. Not because you are broken, not because you dislike connection, but because your mind requires silence in the same way a seed requires darkness. The real question is whether you have spent your life apologizing for the very environment where your greatest strengths quietly developed. Perhaps the intelligence you have been searching for has never been missing. It has simply been growing, away from the noise. There is a question that quietly follows many intelligent people throughout their lives. Why do I always feel different? Not better, not superior, simply different. They enter a crowded room, yet feel strangely disconnected. They participate in conversations, yet secretly wonder why so few people ask deeper questions. They often leave social gatherings feeling more exhausted than refreshed. Eventually, they begin believing. But throughout my years studying the unconscious, I reached another conclusion. The deepest minds often experience loneliness, not because they cannot connect, but because they rarely find conversations that nourish the parts of themselves that matter most. Most discussions revolve around events, people, possessions, achievements, opinions. The reflective mind quietly searches for something else, meaning, patterns, motivation, truth. Instead of asking what happened, they naturally ask, why did it happen? Imagine standing before a magnificent painting. One person admires the colors, another studies the artist, a third quietly wonders what emotional experience inspired its creation. The painting remains identical, only the depth of observation changes. Human beings are no different. Most people notice behavior. The reflective mind searches for the unconscious beneath the behavior. This often creates misunderstanding. Someone tells a story, everyone laughs. The quiet thinker suddenly becomes silent, not because they failed to understand the joke, because another question has already appeared inside their mind. Why did they need everyone? The unconscious constantly speaks through ordinary moments. Few people notice. The reflective mind notices almost everything. At first, this feels like a gift. Eventually, it also becomes a burden, because once you begin recognizing hidden patterns, you cannot easily return to superficial living. You notice dishonesty hidden beneath compliments. You notice loneliness hiding behind endless social activity. You notice fear pretending to be anger. Most people hear words. You begin hearing motives, not because you are suspicious, because your unconscious has quietly learned to recognize emotional patterns long before your conscious mind explains them. This heightened awareness often creates another unusual experience. People begin calling you an overthinker. Perhaps you have heard this word many times. You think too much. You're making it more complicated than it is. Why can't you just relax? These words are usually spoken by individuals whose minds process experience differently. There is nothing wrong with that. Every personality possesses its own strengths, but the reflective individual should remember something important. Depth is not dysfunction. Curiosity is not weakness. Questioning is not. Many breakthroughs throughout history were made by individuals willing to sit with uncertainty longer than everyone else. They refused easy answers. They remained patient, while others rushed toward conclusions. This patience created extraordinary understanding. There is another reason intelligent people often appear isolated. They spend enormous amounts of energy questioning themselves. This surprises many, Society imagines intelligent people possess endless confidence. Often, the opposite becomes true. The more deeply you understand reality, the more aware you become of everything still unknown. The conscious mind gently whispers, there is still more to discover. This humility often prevents intelligent individuals from speaking too quickly. They understand that words carry consequences. Every opinion influences someone. Every conclusion shapes perception. Therefore, they choose language carefully, not because they fear speaking, because they respect truth. Imagine an experienced surgeon preparing for a difficult operation. Would you trust the one who boasts immediately? Because they respect truth. It's not because they lack ideas, because they are allowing their unconscious enough time to organize them properly. Silence becomes part of the thinking process. Many people mistake this pause for hesitation. In reality, it is precision. One of the greatest discoveries I made was that the unconscious continues working long after the conscious mind stops thinking. Have you ever struggled with a difficult problem all day, only to discover the answer while taking a walk, or lying awake at night, or quietly drinking coffee alone? This happens because the unconscious never truly stops processing experience. While the conscious mind rests, the deeper psyche quietly continues connecting ideas. This happens because the unconscious never truly... It creates space where unconscious intelligence can finally become conscious. Modern life constantly interrupts this process. Notifications, meetings, messages, entertainment, noise. Very few people spend enough uninterrupted time alone to hear the quiet wisdom already developing inside them. The reflective person naturally protects this time, not because they dislike people, because they understand that insight requires stillness. There is another painful truth many intelligent individuals eventually discover. Not everyone wants understanding. Some people seek only agreement. This realization changes relationships forever. Not everyone wants understanding. Some people seek only agreement. This realization changes relationships forever. Earlier in life, you believed that if people simply understood your intentions, everything would become peaceful. Eventually, you realize something different. Some minds have already chosen certainty. No explanation can enter a mind that has closed itself to curiosity. This realization feels painful at first. Then, it becomes liberating. You stop wasting energy convincing those committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you quietly continue developing yourself. The reflective mind eventually understands something extraordinary. Not every person is meant to understand your journey. Some simply arrive to teach you another lesson about yourself. Your intelligence was never meant to make you fit into every room. Sometimes, it was preparing you to build an entirely different life, one that requires far less approval and far more authenticity, because the deepest minds rarely find peace by becoming like everyone else. They find peace by finally accepting why they never could. There comes a moment in the life of every reflective person when they begin noticing something unsettling. The people around them have not changed. The world continues moving exactly as before. Yet ordinary conversations begin feeling strangely empty, not because other people have become less intelligent, but because your consciousness has begun asking different questions. You searched for excitement. Now, you search for meaning. Earlier, you wanted people to notice you. Now, you want to understand yourself. Earlier, you feared being alone. Now, you fear spending your entire life surrounded by people who never truly know you. This transformation is often misunderstood. Friends may say, "You've changed." Family members may wonder why you have become quieter. Some assume you have become distant. Others believe you have become arrogant. In reality, you have simply become more selective with your attention. There is an enormous psychological difference between isolation. Now is an enormous solitude quietly whispers, "I finally understand why I need space to hear myself think." Throughout my years studying the unconscious, I discovered that many highly intelligent individuals were not escaping the world. They were escaping unnecessary noise. Noise is not merely sound. Noise is every conversation without depth, every argument without purpose, every relationship built upon appearances rather than truth, every distraction that slowly pulls you away from your authentic self. The reflective mind instinctively begins protecting itself. The reflective mind instinctively begins protecting itself from these things, not because it hates people, because it understands something most never realize. Attention is life. Whatever repeatedly spend years surrounded by shallow thinking, and your own thinking slowly becomes shallow. Spend years surrounded by fear, and fear quietly enters your own perception. Spend years surrounded by bitterness, and eventually bitterness begins shaping your personality. The unconscious absorbs far more than the conscious mind notices. This is why choosing your environment is one of the most important psychological decisions you will ever make. Imagine placing a seed into poisoned soil. No matter how extraordinary the seed may be, its growth becomes limited by the environment surrounding it. Human potential follows the same law. Many intelligent people spent years believing they lacked confidence. Surrounding it, human potential they simply remained in environments that rewarded conformity more than originality. Whenever they asked deeper questions, people laughed. Whenever they expressed unusual ideas, others dismissed them. Whenever they preferred silence over gossip, they were called strange. Slowly, they learned to hide parts of themselves. Not because those parts were wrong, because acceptance appeared more valuable than authenticity. This is where the persona quietly begins taking control. The persona, as I described throughout my work, is the mask we create for the world. It allows us to function within society. Every human being possesses one. Many intelligent people spend years pretending to enjoy conversations that secretly exhaust them, pretending to admire values they no longer believe, pretending to agree simply to avoid conflict. Eventually, the mask becomes so familiar that they forget who they were before wearing it. This is one of the greatest psychological dangers imaginable, because the unconscious never stops calling you back toward authenticity. At first, it whispers through emotional exhaustion. Finally, if ignored long enough, through crisis. Many people call this a midlife crisis. I saw the authentic self demanding to be recognized after years of neglect. The intelligent individual eventually reaches a crossroads. One path offers comfort, approval, predictability. The other offers uncertainty, growth, authenticity. Few people choose the second path willingly, because it often requires disappointing others. Imagine climbing a mountain while everyone else remains in the valley. The higher you climb, the fewer people remain beside you, not because the mountain rejects them, because the climb demands effort many are unwilling to give. Psychological growth follows exactly the same principle. The deeper your awareness, you wonder, why am I losing people? But ask yourself another question. Were you losing people, or were you losing relationships that only survived because you kept pretending? Healthy relationships survive authenticity. Unhealthy relationships survive performance. That distinction changes everything. Many reflective individuals eventually realize they have spent years being understood only through their usefulness. They were the listener, the advisor, the dependable one, the person you truly were. Do not become bitter because of this. Become conscious. Bitterness keeps you attached to the past. Awareness allows you to move beyond it. One of the greatest strengths of the intelligent mind is its ability to transform suffering into understanding. Where another person sees only disappointment, the reflective individual quietly asks, "What is life trying to teach me?" That question has extraordinary power, because it transforms pain into purpose, failure into education, loneliness into self-discovery. Nothing meaningful is wasted. The unconscious stores every experience, every conversation. This is why your greatest insights rarely appear while chasing them. They arrive unexpectedly, during a quiet walk, a long drive, a peaceful morning before the world awakens, or while sitting alone with nothing except your own thoughts. People often call these moments coincidence. I rarely believed they were. The unconscious prepares answers long before the conscious mind becomes ready to receive them. Perhaps that explains why your greatest ideas have always arrived when you were alone. Not because solitude made you smarter, but because solitude, it arrives quietly, without celebration, without applause, without anyone else even noticing. From the outside, you appear exactly the same, but within, something irreversible has changed. You stop chasing approval, not because you suddenly stop caring about people, but because you finally begin caring about truth, more than acceptance. This is one of the rarest transformations a human being can experience. For years, the ego whispers, be liked, fit in, don't disappoint anyone. Make sure they understood by yourself matters more than being accepted by everyone else. That single question changes an entire life. Make sure. Throughout my years studying the unconscious, I observed that intelligent individuals eventually become less interested in popularity and far more interested in authenticity. Earlier, they carefully measured every word, every opinion, every decision. They feared disagreement. They feared rejection. They feared standing apart from the crowd. Then experience slowly taught them something remarkable. Agreement is not proof of truth. Crowds have often been wrong. History reminds us of this repeatedly. The majority free truth has never depended upon numbers. It has depended upon courage. Imagine standing before an ancient forest. Every tree grows according to its own rhythm. The oak does not envy the pine. The pine does not imitate the cedar. Each follows the design hidden within its own nature. Human beings were meant to develop the same way, yet society quietly teaches the opposite. Compare yourself, compete constantly, measure your worth through the opinions of strangers. The reflective mind eventually rejects this entire game, not because competition is evil, because comparison slowly destroys originality. This is why intelligent people often appear difficult to influence. Advertisements lose much of their power. Trends rarely excite them. Social pressure becomes less effective, not because they believe they know everything, because they have learned to pause before accepting every idea the world presents. That pause is extraordinarily important. Within that pause, the unconscious begins asking questions. Who benefits if I believe this? Does this truly align with my values? Am I choosing freely or simply following the crowd? Few people ask these questions. Most simply imitate what appears popular. Few people ask these questions. One of the greatest psychological strengths is independent thought. Not rebellious thought, not oppositional thought, conscious thought. The ability to examine reality before accepting it. This ability often creates loneliness, because independent thinkers eventually discover that many conversations revolve around certainty rather than curiosity. People defend opinions they have never examined. They repeat beliefs they have never questioned. They inherit values without asking whether those values truly belong to them. The conscious loves curiosity. Their curiosity keeps the psyche alive. Certainty often puts it to sleep. This is why I always encouraged individuals to remain students of their own minds. The moment you believe you fully understand yourself, growth quietly ends. Every human being contains unexplored territory, hidden strengths, forgotten fears, untouched creativity, unknown courage. The intelligent individual never stops exploring. Imagine entering an enormous library. You read one shelf of books. Would you honestly declare, I now know everything? Of course not. Yet many people make this mistake with their own personalities. They experience a few chapters of life, then decide they already, because it knows how much still remains undiscovered. This realization creates humility, not insecurity, humility. The intelligent person becomes increasingly comfortable saying, I don't know yet. Those 4 words possess extraordinary psychological power. They keep the mind open, flexible, curious, alive. One of the greatest dangers facing intelligent individuals is not failure. It is isolation becoming identity. There is a profound difference between enjoying solitude and believing no one can ever understand you. The unconscious can quietly transform healthy independence into emotional distance. And that they forget wisdom also grows through meaningful connection. Even the deepest mind occasionally needs another perspective, another challenge, another honest conversation. Solitude should become a sanctuary, never a prison. The healthiest thinkers understand this balance. They protect their time alone, but they also recognize the immense value of relationships rooted in authenticity, not relationships built upon appearances, not endless social activity, but genuine connection. But when they appear, they become among life's greatest treasures. Do not mistake rarity for impossibility. You were never meant to be understood by everyone, only by the people capable of meeting you at the depth where your authentic self truly lives. And perhaps that has always been enough, because intelligence is not measured by how many people admire your mind. It is measured by whether your mind remains honest enough to continue searching for truth, even when you must search for it alone. If you have remained with me until this moment, there is something I hope you will remember long after these words have faded into silence. The world has convinced many intelligent people that they are broken, when in truth, they were simply growing in a direction that most people could not yet understand. There is a profound difference. The greatest tragedy is not being misunderstood by others. The greatest tragedy is spending your entire life misunderstanding yourself. Throughout my years exploring the unconscious, I discovered that every human being carries two lives. The first is the life the world expects. The second is the life the soul quietly dreams of living. For many people, these two lives never meet. The persona becomes stronger each year. The mask grows heavier. The authentic self retreats deeper into the unconscious. People call this maturity. Often, it is surrender. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because authenticity finally becomes more valuable than approval. Think carefully about every chapter of your life. The friends who walked away, the opportunities that disappeared, the seasons when you felt completely alone. At the time, you believed life was taking something from you. Years later, you began realizing something extraordinary. Life was removing distractions. Every ending created space. Every disappointment sharpened awareness. Every lonely season strengthened. Every disappointment hides another invitation toward consciousness. The question has never been, why did this happen? The real question has always been, who is this experience asking me to become? That question changes suffering into wisdom, because once you stop resisting every difficult experience, the unconscious begins revealing its hidden purpose. One of the greatest misconceptions about intelligence is that it should make life easier. Often, it makes life more demanding. You notice contradictions other people ignore. You recognize emotional patterns before they become visible. Why constant entertainment feels exhausting. Why your greatest moments of clarity arrive when you are completely alone. Do not fear this. The tree with the deepest roots grows far from constant disturbance. The eagle flies where few birds are willing to climb. The diamond forms beneath enormous pressure. Nature has never created extraordinary things through comfort. Why should the human soul be any different? There comes a day when you finally stop apologizing for the way your mind works. You stop acting less curious, less thoughtful, less observant, simply to avoid standing apart. Instead, you quietly accept something beautiful. You were never created to think like everyone else. You were created to think like yourself. That realization feels almost frightening, because authenticity always requires courage. The crowd offers certainty. Individuality offers freedom. Few people choose freedom. Freedom demands responsibility. Responsibility demands awareness. Awareness demands honesty, and honesty often changes everything. Imagine spending your entire life walking through a crowded city, always looking at the ground, because everyone else does the same. Then one morning, you look upward. Suddenly, you notice architecture you had never seen. Sunlight reflecting from windows, birds moving across the sky. Nothing changed except your perspective. The unconscious develops exactly this way. Awareness does not create a new reality. It reveals the one that has always existed. Many intelligent people secretly believe they have missed something in life. They compare themselves to louder personalities, to more social individuals, to people who appear endlessly confident. But comparison has always been one of the ego's greatest illusions. A flower never compares itself to the stars. The ocean never envies the mountains. Nature expresses itself differently through every form of life. The human psyche was never designed for comparison, but comparison has always been one of the ego's greatest illusions. Not your parents' expectations, not society's image, not the version created by fear, the authentic self. Many people reach the end of their lives having achieved remarkable success, yet never truly discovering who they were. Others quietly live ordinary lives, yet become completely whole. Tell me, which life possesses greater meaning? Throughout all my observations, one truth became impossible to ignore. The people who eventually changed the world first learned how to stand comfortably alone. Not forever, not in isolation, but long enough to hear their own voice before the world tried to replace it with someone else's. Perhaps every season of solitude was preparing you for independence. Every disappointment was teaching discernment. Every misunderstanding was strengthening authenticity. Every lonely road was quietly leading you back toward yourself. If that is true, then your solitude was never your punishment. It was your classroom, and every silent moment became another lesson, another insight, another invisible step toward becoming the person you were always capable of being. Remember this carefully. The world often celebrates those who speak the loudest. History remembers those who understood the deepest. The crowd follows trends. The conscious individual follows truth. The crowd follows trends. The conscious individual follows truth. The wise person learns to become a friend to their own mind, because once you are no longer afraid of your own silence, the opinions of the world begin losing their power. No one can manipulate someone who already knows themselves. No one can distract someone who has discovered their purpose. No one can diminish someone whose confidence no longer depends upon applause. This is the true meaning of psychological freedom, not escaping the world, but living within it without allowing it to define who you are. You simply spent too many years believing intelligence should look like everyone else's. It does not. Sometimes, it looks like a person sitting quietly in the corner, watching, thinking, connecting ideas no one else notices. Sometimes, it looks like someone choosing solitude instead of noise, reflection instead of performance, understanding instead of attention. If that describes you, do not mistake your path for weakness. The strongest minds often grow where no one is watching. And perhaps that is exactly where yours has been growing all along. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Until our next exploration, you were simply growing in silence while the world was distracted by noise, because the smartest minds are not always the loudest. They are often the ones who learned that true wisdom is discovered alone before it is ever shared with the world. Thank you for listening.